Hi, everyone. This is your host, Raven Syed, and welcome back to Forgotten Echoes, a podcast where we dive into the mysterious and unexplained cases of Black women that often get lost in time. Today, we dive into a case of Cleashindra Hall, an 18-year-old high school senior with a promising future who disappeared on May 9th, 1994, in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Despite years of searching, her fate remains unknown. What happened that night? And could the answers still be hidden in plain sight? This is Forgotten Echoes, Episode 4, The Disappearance of Cleashindra Hall. Sources for today's episode include Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette, Without a Trace, Our Black Girls, ABC7, the Arkansas Justice Project, Dateline, Arkansas Online, and Wikipedia. Now let's get into the case. Cleashindra Denise Hall, or Clea, as she was known by family and friends, was born on March 30th, 1976, the only daughter to parents Willie and Laurel Hall. Cleashindra was described by friends and family as reliable, level-headed, silly, and extremely intelligent. She was grounded firmly in faith, family, and education, but she also had a playful, silly side to her. It wasn't uncommon to see her laughing or goofing around with her friends. She was the kind of kid and student that parents brag about, and the type of friend you look up to. And this totally tracks, as she was selected as her high school's 1994 valedictorian. Unfortunately, she would never get the chance to read her speech on graduation day, just 2 weeks after her disappearance. Clea also had a passion for children. When she worked in the nursery at her local church, it was common to see her laughing and smiling with a child. Sound familiar? She sounds like she was a breath of fresh air. When you saw Clea, she was always playing with somebody's child, her mother Laurel Hall remembered. And it didn't end there. Her love of children sparked her dream of becoming a pediatrician. Not only was she a dedicated honor student at Watson Chapel High School, she had been accepted into the pre-med program at Tennessee State University on scholarship, her absolute dream. And that summer, she was set to begin an internship at a pediatrician's office in Boston, the first step towards fulfilling her goal of becoming a doctor. I just want to jump in here and say that the 2025 kids would say that Clea is that girl. I mean, seriously, I want to be her friend because pre-med wants to be a pediatrician on scholarship, Tennessee State, in the 90s, a young Black woman. I mean, she was just that girl. And it's really awesome to see, one, the way her family and friends talk about her and remember her really mirrors her life. And it shows how intelligent, how responsible, how kind she was. You can see that in her every day. So just throwing that out there, because what an accomplishment at such a young age. And then on top of that, her high school valedictorian, that's incredible. I was just blown away at how accomplished she was at only being 18 years old. I also wanted to jump in and clarify some timing. So from Arkansas, she was going to go to Boston to attend her internship. I also saw some reports of maybe attending a leadership conference. I don't know if it was together or two separate things that just so happened to be in Boston, but she was spending the summer in Boston. And then from there, she was going to be flying or going to Tennessee for her first fall semester in pre-med program. So just clarifying some timing. Arkansas to Boston to Tennessee. To sum it up, Clea wasn't just academically gifted. She was also responsible, kind, and so deeply loved by her family and friends. Doing my research for this case, it's so obvious they were all extremely close-knit. This leads up to a warm spring evening in May, just weeks before Clea was set to embark on the next chapter of her life. That Monday was the Hall's first day back to their normal routine, following a busy weekend. Clea's prom had been that past Friday. She then attended a sorority ball on Saturday, and to top it all off, they celebrated Mother's Day on Sunday. Nobody could have ever imagined what would happen that upcoming week. On Monday, May 9th, 1994, which should have been just another normal evening for Clea and her family, was anything but usual. She was dropped off at work by her mother around 5 p.m., just after finishing up a day at school. Clea worked at the home office of Dr. Larry Amos, a man who ran a nonprofit organization supporting in-home daycare centers. And to jump in here, so Dr. Larry Amos wasn't actually a medical doctor. I searched for licenses. I searched for some type of certificate, schooling. I also read other blogs and interviews, and everyone else is asking the same thing. And many other people have confirmed that he has no actual medical license. So he's not an actual medical doctor. It looks like he just worked for a nonprofit that supported children within the community. So maybe within the healthcare or wellness space, but important to note that he's not an actual medical doctor. At around 8 p.m., Clea called her mother and asked if anyone had tried to reach her. When Laurel said no, Clea simply responded, "Okay," and hung up. That was the last time anyone in her family heard from her. Laurel, expecting another call when Clea was ready to be picked up, dozed off on the couch. When her husband Willie came home around 1 a.m. and noticed Clea wasn't in her room, panic immediately set in. Her mother told the Arkansas Gazette, quote, "I hopped up out of my sleep and went to look at her bed because I was literally half asleep," Laurel Hall said. "I said, I don't know. I went to the phone, looked at the number to her job, and asked her boss, was she still at work? He said, no, I think she left around 8:30. I said, who did she leave with? Because I was supposed to pick her up. He's like, I don't know." Laurel Hall added, almost confirmed Clea left at 8:30 by checking her time card. Quote, Patricia, Dr. Amos's wife, who was also at the home while Clea was working, told police in a written report, quote, "It was odd that she left without telling either of us," quote. Apparently, Clea made a habit out of telling them when she was clocking out for the evening before she left the home, so this wasn't normal at all. Laurel stated, "I'm thinking, okay, she's never done this before, but she is a teenager and she's 18, about to graduate, so maybe she decided that she's going to flex her independent muscles," Laurel said. "But I stayed up all night because I'm looking out the window thinking, you're going to be in trouble, young lady, when you come home. But daylight came, and she wasn't at home." At first, Clea's family thought she might have gone straight to school that morning, but the Hall's middle son confirmed that when he got to school, Clea didn't show up. The Halls contacted the police that morning, only to be told they needed to wait 24 hours before filing a missing persons report. Frustrated and worried, Laurel took matters into her own hands, searching the area near Clea's workplace and putting up missing person flyers. Finally, after the 24 hours, the initial missing persons report mentions Clea wearing a two-piece short set that was navy blue and white socks and white tennis shoes, and a white bow in her hair. Her family provided additional information stating Clea was 5'9", weighed 120 pounds, and had dark eyes and short black hair, which she often wore in a ponytail. She also had a surgical scar on her left knee. It didn't help that Clea didn't have a purse or an ID on her at the time of her disappearance. I just want to recap the last 2 minutes of me talking. So to start, in most states, there's not an actual law that prohibits police from taking a statement before the 24-hour mark. Keep calling, keep checking in, do your due diligence. And that's exactly what this family did. A lot of police departments will use this as a rule of thumb. especially if the perceived person is 18 or older, because they could have left on their own volition. They could be out partying with friends, whatever the case is, especially teenagers. And majority of the time, that is exactly what's happening. However, I am a firm believer, and I see both sides of the coin when I say this, but I'm a firm believer that parents know their children. Clea was not the type of kid that would just leave on her own volition, not tell her mom, especially when her mom had just spoke to her at 8, and just like not show up at home or at school the next day. That was not in her character. So just remember, and I mean, I hope that anyone listening to this doesn't happen to you, but remember, check your laws. Most likely it's not a law, especially if the person that might be missing is under the age of 18, because I've seen in some cases where the person is 16, 17, and they still use that rule of thumb before they declare that person missing or want to start an investigation. So do your due diligence, follow up, keep checking in, be annoying. The person perceived missing absolutely deserves it. I also want to go over the fact that apparently Clea left, and Dr. Amos tells her mother that he doesn't really know when she left, but he's thinking around 8:30 and then verifies that on her time card. Which is strange because the wife, Patricia, is saying that she never said anything when she left. She just kind of dipped. So, I mean, she calls him in the middle of the night and she's like, hey, have you seen Clea? And he's like, I don't know. She might have left at 8:30. And then he looks at her time card and verifies, yes, it was 8:30. So did she not tell anyone she was leaving? Or, you know what I mean? Like, how would you know she left at 8:30? You would say, I don't know when she left. She just left. Let me call you back and look that up, or whatever the case is. But to tell her mom on the phone, because her mom calls randomly in the middle of the night around like 1, 2 a.m., you know, to say 8:30-ish right off the back and then verify it was a little strange to me. Something's not adding up. And I also just think, you know, like I said a little earlier, she was a responsible kid. He had mentioned that she had gotten into a car, or they don't know with who or anything along those lines, but I just don't see that happening. And I think it was a little strange that he had mentioned that maybe she got in the car with someone else at some point. All of it was a little weird to me, but that was my takeaway from the last 2 minutes or so. Now, when police start their investigation, they immediately speak with Dr. Amos, who claimed Clea had signed out of the workplace at 8:30 p.m., just as he told her parents. However, he said he heard the garage door open and assumed that she had gotten into the car with someone, and that's what I just prefaced into 30 seconds ago. But this is super important. He never saw who the person was. He just says that he hears the garage door open. He assumes, or maybe sees, she's getting into the car, or sees a car pull up, but he doesn't know who the person is. Police eventually try and figure out who this mystery driver could have been, but there were very little leads. No one had seen Clea after she left work, and no one came forward to say that they picked her up. Suspicion soon fell on Dr. Larry Amos. Larry, who was the last person to see Clea, and his story raised a lot of questions, to say the least. If he had heard the garage door open, why didn't he check to see who picked her up? 2 years later, in 1986, police conducted a search of Dr. Amos's home, but nothing significant was found. This was the last known sighting of Cleashindra Hall. The police believe she left with someone she knew, but they have no leads on who that person might be. Now, jumping in here again, I don't believe that she went home with someone else, or she got a ride home with someone else, as there were a couple different accounts as to what happened that evening. I just don't believe it. And I think it's a little also strange that Dr. Amos, when he talked to the parents, is saying, I think she left at 8:30. Oh, let me verify that. Oh, in her timesheet, it does say 8:30. But then to the police, he mentions that he hears the garage open and sees her get into a car. They're very small changes to the story, but they're significant, because if you saw her leave and get into the car, then that kind of clashes with Patricia, his wife, saying that she just left and they never knew when she left. And then that also clashes with him saying, I don't know when she left. Let me check her timesheet to verify. Because you knew exactly when she left. You heard the garage door open and you saw her get into a car. All of it was a little weird. And like I said, we can't verify one way or another, but it's just the stories, they're slightly shifted over a period of time and they just don't really make sense. So bear with me for a second as I go down a Dr. Larry Amos rabbit hole. So Detective Lieutenant Hobson, who has been on the case for its entirety, stated, quote, "In this case, Amos was the last person to see her, but that alone doesn't make him guilty," quote. On the other hand, Clea's family believes Amos's actions after Clea's disappearance were suspicious. Her mother said, "I don't think he's done enough to rule himself out as a suspect." Just one day after Clea went missing, Amos left the state for a business trip. However, he said that this was a pre-planned trip and had nothing to do with the disappearance whatsoever. He came home as word got around that Clea was still missing and it looked suspicious he was gone. I think it's a little weird, playing devil's advocate. I think it's weird that he left for sure, but if it was pre-planned and I am assuming, and I'm giving the Pine Bluff Police Department the benefit of the doubt that they looked into this, that this trip was booked, the flight was booked, or however he got there, and it, in fact, was pre-planned. Because if it was, then, obviously that doesn't correlate necessarily with her disappearance. But I do think it's a little weird that your employee goes missing, especially because this is an in-home, facility. So it's they're very close-knit. It's a small team with a few employees. So it makes a difference. You have a young girl who is off to a really big internship in college. She goes missing. You're the last person to see her and you still choose to leave the state. It's a little weird. Detective Hobson stated that while police were initially given full access to Amos's home upon his return, a disagreement with another detective, who has since left the department, led Larry to revoke their access. And the next time they were able to search the property was 2 years later, though they didn't find anything during this search. It wasn't until March 29th of 2012, 18 years after Clea's disappearance, that authorities conducted a more extensive search of his property, which was actually 2 homes side by side. Based on new witness statements, an affidavit for a search warrant was signed at the time by Pine Bluff Police Department Lieutenant Bob Rawlinson, and it stated, quote, "Recently obtained sworn and unsworn statements link Dr. Amos to the disappearance of Cleashindra Hall. Sworn statements indicate the observance of a false wall inside the residence containing blood on the insulation. Also, statements indicate that the body was buried on the property at 5309 Fawcett Road in a hole where bricks and rocks and powdered concrete was used to cover up something." Quote. However, no body was found, but investigators did remove 4 pieces of evidence from the property that day. Shockingly, those items were never sent to the crime lab due to clerical error, a failure that still haunts Clea's case today. Eventually, Pine Bluff Police acknowledged the forensic evidence collected on March 29th was finally sent to the Arkansas State Crime Lab, and Police Chief Brenda Davis Jones assured the Hall family that the evidence was now with the crime lab and that her department has been in regular contact with them. "We call the crime lab at least once a week, but they haven't processed it yet," Davis Jones said at a city council meeting. "Once we receive the results, we'll be more than happy to move forward in the case." Turns out the items that were submitted, they were submitted after more than a month, which compromised them forensically. Once reports came back, items taken from Larry Amos's home in March showed no blood evidence. But can we even believe this? And just throwing in more of my 2 cents here, why was the evidence never sent to the crime lab immediately? This is the part that just frustrates you. And I think this is the part where police departments, especially when it comes to cases involving minorities, specifically young Black victims or women, I just think these type of little clerical errors and these little issues throughout the case, they're just not deemed as important because something as simple as 4 pieces of evidence couldn't even make it to the crime lab on time and safely. Mind you, this is a cold case going on 2 decades old. It's astonishing and it's borderline disrespectful. I don't even know what else to call it. And another thing, shout out to once again Clea's family for just being consistent. Throughout this case, they have been on Pine Bluff's police department's butt like white on rice. Like they are at city council meetings. They are calling out police chiefs. They are calling on the lieutenant investigators. They are like doing everything they can almost 2 decades later to make sure that Clea's name is not forgotten and she is essentially being advocated for. A Pine Bluff Police Department spokesperson confirmed that an internal investigation was underway to determine the cause of the delay here. And turns out it was just good old insubordinance, someone not doing their job, which seems to be the common denominator throughout this case. So yes, this was just somebody who just didn't do their job and didn't submit the evidence on time. And it actually was sitting in the back of a truck the entire time. Cleashindra's mother expressed frustration over the handling of her daughter's cold case, stating, quote, "I can't believe the chief held on to this evidence for so long," Hall said before her daughter's vigil. "My question is, why? Those in the department who seem to be obstructing this investigation will be there tomorrow." But she said, "Tonight, it's about Clea," quote. It had been 18 years since Cleashindra went missing, and her family was consoling one another. So I'm going to point out a few things because we went over a lot in like 5 minutes. That was a lot of information, and the case pretty much went cold from like 1996, where they did that little like search that wasn't too extensive, but it was a search and they didn't find anything, to then fast forward 2012 and they do a really extensive search because of this affidavit that's brought up. Now, in the affidavit, they have unsworn and sworn statements from people that are saying that there was some blood found within the home. They noticed a concrete slab where there wasn't one before, and they thought that could have been maybe hiding a body, et cetera, et cetera. I want to say what I mention next is based off of my own sleuthing at 2 a.m. going down a rabbit hole on Reddit. This is only opinion and based off of that. And if you know anything about Reddit, then you know you know. So this is opinion-based. It is not factual. It's not backed by anything. This is just me talking and going over what I saw. Now, on a couple of threads, I thought it was really interesting that, one, these statements may have been made by employees of Larry, as well as construction workers. So they were working on the home. That's where they find blood on the insulation. Once again, we don't know if this was construction workers or employees, but this is where it's coming from. And a specific employee that had seen Larry's home over the years noticed the concrete slab and thought that was really strange because it almost came about overnight. And construction workers weren't able to go around that concrete slab. So that was very interesting. I saw, because I was kind of like, blood on the insulation, where did that come from? But then when I saw the construction workers, that was interesting. Also thought it was really interesting that Larry Amos's property wasn't just the one own or the one home, pardon me. It was also the home next to his home. So he owned both properties, and both properties were extensively searched, and just the 4 pieces of evidence that we weren't able to find anything out about were found. I mean, it doesn't really mean anything in particular. It's just strange. I don't know. All of it. I didn't know that he had 2 homes, both his properties, the random concrete slab, former employee, etc. Now, on another thread, I saw that the night Cleashindra went missing, there may have been a gathering or even a party at Larry's home. And they even essentially linked this to the fact that Cleashindra was going to be wrapping up her time working for Dr. Amos. Obviously, she's going on her internship to Boston that summer. So this gathering or party, if you will, was for her. Once again, this is on Reddit. I don't know if this is true, but actually on this thread, they had a link to this website where they wanted to source the article they got this information from. Unfortunately, the link was broken, so I wasn't able to obtain that, so I only can go off of this Redditor's word. Now, this is really interesting because that means there was more people at the house. I assumed the entire time it was Larry, Patricia, it's a childcare, so possibly some children, and then Clea, who's working her night shift, and that's about it. But if there was a gathering or some sort at the house, I go into who else was there? Were they spoken to? Police haven't confirmed or denied this, so it's hard to say if it's true or not, but that was what I read, which would be very interesting. Another thing I thought of too was the fact that Clea didn't have a cell phone. Now, she made the call to her mother at 8 p.m. from Larry's home phone. Were phone records ever obtained, or was any data gathered? Was that even possible in the mid-90s? I would assume so, but I don't know, because if that second call was made, then we know something maybe more sinister might have been at play, because if she called out once again to her mother to come pick her up, but maybe it didn't go through or whatever the case is, I don't know, that would be a little strange. Now, if we never get a call, that's also weird because Larry is saying that the garage went up and she left at 8:30 and that's what time she clocked out. And her mother saying she called and spoke to her physically at 8 o'clock. So what happened in those 30 minutes and why didn't she call a second time to say, can you come pick me up, or to say I'm getting a ride or I'm walking or whatever the case is. So I just think the phone data would be really helpful no matter which way it goes, the second call or not seeing a second call in there. Another thing that I read, and I believe this is actually confirmed as well, is the Hall's family actually met with Larry Amos's ex-wife. And this is, once again, an opinion. It's not fact-based. This is just what I've read. But to kind of find out more about Larry, because I don't think he's ever been truly cleared in the eyes of the Hall's family, they meet up with his ex-wife, and his ex-wife essentially describes him as being abusive and violent in having an explosive temperament, which obviously doesn't mean he's guilty, but I definitely think it speaks to his character. I mean, I read even that the ex-wife was so scared when meeting up with the Hall family that she hired someone to essentially be undercover outside of the restaurant they were meeting up at. And Laurel, or Clea's mom, asked the ex-wife, like, hey, that person looks like they're watching us. And the ex-wife says, yeah, he is. I hired him because I was so fearful. I thought Larry was behind you guys meeting up with me. Once again, not factual, but I thought it was really interesting and chilling to read, if true. And I did read a little bit more into the ex-wife, and she did actually say that a reason for their divorce was he was violent and abusive. But once again, police have said that they looked into this theory actually and said that she could have been doing this out of vengeance. There was some other stuff going on at play during their divorce. It got kind of messy, et cetera, et cetera. So we don't actually know if that's factual or not. Now, police have not found any other physical evidence linking Amos or anyone else to Clea's disappearance and have declined to name him as a suspect as of today, 2025. As the years have passed, Clea's family has never given up hope. Her mother stated, quote, I have a fear of leaving Earth and not knowing what happened to her. If I stop looking or we stop looking, who's going to help me find out what happened to my child? Quote. Each year on her birthday, the family releases balloons in Clea's honor, refusing to let her memory fade. Someone somewhere knows what happened at Cleashindra Hall. Could new evidence still emerge? Could someone finally come forward with the truth? It's been really difficult, Laurel Hall says. We're a strong Christian family, but even with that, we can only take on so much. We have our good days and our bad days. Today is not a real good day for me because it's been 30 years, and 30 years is a long time. My oldest grandchild, which she hasn't seen, is 22, and so time is passing by, and we haven't a clue as to where she is. We know there is somebody out there with the information we need. While addressing a small crowd in front of her church, Laurel Hall pleaded for anyone with information to come forward, asking, quote, "Is it you?" She couldn't have vanished into thin air. God is able, but I don't think that's what happened to her, quote. Now here's the call to action. If you have any information regarding Cleashindra Hall's disappearance, please contact the Pine Bluff Police Department at area code 870-730-2090 or the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-THE-LOST. That's 1-800-843-5678. Clea was a shining light, and her case remains open until this day. Though there have been no new developments in this 1994 case, the continued public interest is a powerful reminder of how deeply she was loved and how her memory lives on. We will keep sharing her story and photos, holding on to hope that time and changing circumstances will encourage someone to come forward. While no one has been criminally charged in her disappearance, I can ensure that those responsible are reminded of her face every time they see her story shared. Like Clea's family, I will lean on my faith and pray that they receive the answers they seek. Thank you for tuning in to episode 4 of Forgotten Echoes. Please do me a favor and show your support by following this podcast and liking, subscribing, and sharing this episode. I'm Raven Syed, and I'll see you next week with another case that needs to be remembered. Stay vigilant, stay aware, and keep the echoes of the forgotten alive. I'll see you soon.